You're listening to the Career Plus Life Catch-Up, episode number 80. Welcome to the Career Plus Life Catch-Up, a show anchored in reality to help you create a balanced life where you enjoy both your work and your life, because you don't have to choose. I am your host, Cecile Ferry, a corporate executive turned coach and working mom. This is your place for insights, advice, and tools to optimize your career direction, balance, and confidence. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to the podcast this week. Thank you for tuning in. So if you've pressed play, you're probably feeling like you need a couple of tips for the silly season. So we're going to get into it shortly. First of all, I just want to say I hope you're hanging on. It's been such a big year and there's still 2 more months to go. Don't know you, but October has been a really big, intense month for a lot of people. So maybe this is going to be a very timely episode for you. So I really want to talk about the silly season, and I have a feeling I could just post that episode again in November 2024 and 2025 and so on, because every single year we seem to fall into the same kind of period where it's called the silly season, it's called madness, and these are not very positive terms for a reason. A lot of people loathe that time of the year and get a bit resentful and get cranky, and everyone is already tired and gets even more tired. And somehow it happens every year. So my hope is with this podcast, your experience this year will be different from last year. And don't feel like you have to do everything I suggest. Even just one thing can alter your experience this year. So the silly season. It's so silly, right? Because suddenly everyone is just going into overdrive. There are more text messages, whether they're your friends, whether they are people, brands, companies. There are more emails. Ahead of Black Friday sales, I think this year we're going to be spammed even more than before. There are more requests every year, especially at work, for things to be done before the end of the year. More invitations. It's that kind of festive, entertaining time of the year too. More deadlines. I mean, you hear it. More. And it's kind of like everything seems important. Paradoxically, whilst we've got all of that massive inflow, we are tired. It's like month number 11 that we kick in the year. We're very tired, usually physically and mentally, especially this year. So I will do a different episode comes the end of the year with my reflection about 2023. I had wished 2 years ago that by 2023 we would be out of that cycle that has been really unfolding since COVID in 2020. And in my opinion, we are not out of it. I think we might be fully out of it by the end of next year. I will explain in a separate episode. So this year was still a big year of transformation, of processing things, of reflection, of trying to move in certain directions. And some of us have gone through personal changes, professional changes, like a really big year for most of us. And also, I just mentioned October. For those of you that are into astrology, like I am, the activity with the planets in October was crazy. We had 2 massive eclipses, so you may have felt it. You may have lost sleep over it. We're really coming off a pretty rocky, intense year so far. And if I'm going to layer that, because you're like, more, there is currently a high level of collective stress in the world and where you live. I'm recording this in Australia, and I definitely can tell it's not just an impression that I have. I also actually do see market research being done around the country, measuring people's stress levels, confidence level, and a lot of people are extremely worried and stressed with the situation when it comes to finances, cost of living, the peace in the world or lack of, petrol prices, you just name it. There is all sorts of issues happening, stress on people's mortgages, ability to keep their homes. There is so much going on, right? So that's why I wanted to record this episode, because out of all the years, this year feels like the biggest sandwich. And we've got all the more reasons to really look after ourselves and to not increase the load further on our nervous system. Because I've just described it, there is a lot. So I'm going to talk you through 5 aspects that you should pay attention to in order to get through the end of this year without increasing the load and even hopefully feeling better than you may do right now. I'm probably going to ask you to zig when a lot of other people in the world will zag. But if you're here, if you're listening to this podcast, it means that you are one of those people anyway who is ready for that. You're not someone that just follows through without thinking, half asleep. That's not you. You're here to have a different experience, you're more aware, and you are interested in bettering your life. So are you ready? Let's get into it. So first things first, and that won't come at no surprise, you need to focus on you. I want to start with that. Like, how are you doing and feeling right now? And I want you to have a honest look. And I want you to scan each of the 4 layers that make up yourself, which are your physical layer, your mental layer, your emotional layer, and your energetic/spiritual layer. And you may not even be familiar with that kind of exercise. So I'm essentially asking you to kind of sit there and scan a little bit for what is really going on there. How are you feeling? Where are you feeling the pinch? Where is it hurting right now? Where is it just particularly acute? And where do you need, therefore, to maybe focus on, repair, attend to in order to last properly? Like, we're not going to talk about full change here, but we're talking about where do we need a temporary band-aid? Where do we need to heal in order to remain strong until the end of the year? So the answer could be vastly different for anyone listening to this episode, but you know, and the answer will come through you. And some of you, it might be on the physical side, right? You may be really needing sleep. For instance, that might be a really big craving you have because you know your body is so tired when you get up every day. Or you may need more exercise because you haven't moved. You feel like really just heavy. Or maybe you need less exercise because you've pushed yourself so much and your body can't take as much right now. Maybe you do need some physical pampering. You know, I scan other parts of your body. There may be things going on that need urgent attending to. If it comes to your mental layer, do you need a break where you need silence, where you're not being solicited, don't have your phone beeping, or do you need like to have half an hour where you do nothing? That's what I did last Sunday, and it really was a life-changing experience to do nothing for nearly an entire day. I highly recommend it. Do you need different kind of emotions? So when we talk about your emotional layer, do you need more fun? Do you need more joy? Do you need more peace? Do you need no interruption? All of those things. Just scan anything to do with physical, mental, emotional. Like maybe you've gone through something tough and you need time for grief. You need support. Maybe you need to talk to a therapist. I don't know. It's really important to look at ourselves and, so to speak, patch ourselves up where we need it, because it's a bit like putting the oxygen mask on first. This is the foundation. If you have cracks, if you have big holes right now, I guarantee you the next couple of months are going to be extra hard and more problems will emerge. So that's why I say first things first. And don't wait for the 21st or 22nd of December to stop and then rest. Because what's going to happen, and I'm no doctor, FYI, but you will collapse. You will be so exhausted because you would have pushed for so long, and your body doesn't just go, okay, now we're good, we're going to rest. No, your body goes, whoa, give me 2 to 3 weeks to recover from how far you've pushed me. So I'm sure you've been in that situation and it's not fun. And no one wants to be either sick or really too exhausted to care during the Christmas season. And by the way, this could even be number one. You may not even have sorted your breaks yet. Like, have you put your annual leave? Have you decided when you're working, when you're resting, like what's happening? And are you taking a bit of time to really calm down and recover after the year that has been? Maybe that's where you need to start. Okay, here comes number 2. And this is where I'm going to ask you to zig when everyone else zag. We need to reverse the myth of the end of the year, in between commas. So there is this collective belief, this kind of collective religion, right? There's this collective belief that says that there is such thing as the end of the year. It's a set date, it's a set event that sort of turns the clock, so it turns the page, right? Things come to some kind of an end, and there is before the end of the year and there is an after that's very different. So there is that very clear line in the sand, and things are going to change after that. So I am not against having a kind of finish line, right? Why not? Actually, I am all for, taking stock, reflecting. I love doing all of that, and I'm all for having a proper reset. But the problem is we are actually behaving like the world is coming to an end, or the part of life that we're currently in, like this season, is just coming to an end. And therefore, we need to squash so much before the end of the season. Like, can you feel that impression that things are running out? Time is running out. And so I have 2 problems with that. Number 1, it's an arbitrary decision that has been made by I don't know who years ago, saying 31st of December and Christmas is like the end of the year and it's when we reset everything. I have a suspicion this is also fueled by brands who want to take advantage of it commercially, because you can sell a whole heap of things because it's the end of the year, so lots of celebration, right? From the champagne to, all the presents, but also all the things that people need to reset the year, new goals and then gym memberships and the like. So there are definitely people and companies benefiting from having that arbitrary reset at the end of the year. And second problem for me is it's actually not true. Like, time, as you know, does not end. Like, seasons don't really change that much. Actually, if you look at it, let's look at that actually. In terms of nature, the season doesn't change over at the end of the year. It actually is the same season before and after. Astrologically speaking, the astrological year carries on because it's roughly from the end of March to March the following year. So if we look at other dimensions of this world, right, things don't just abruptly change. So I really go back to those things, like the planets and the stars and the trees and nature. Like, those things have been there way before us. And if they're not changing, if they're not cycling something, that to me says, I don't think we should make that big a deal about it. I don't think there is a risk or really such an event happening in our life. So I hope you're on board with me now and you start looking at the end of the year as just a time of the year, but not the end, okay? So the first thing to do is to watch out for all those before the end of the year you request. Like, people will call it, because they use that as an argument. They said, we need to catch up before the end of the year. Or this needs to happen before the end of the year. So every time you hear those couple of words, be on it like, yay, fake, mirage, right? This isn't happening. So it's very likely not to be that urgent. And this is just the result of a collective, what I'll call lack mentality or scarcity mentality around time, and people's insecurities and fears. They have them anyhow about the ability to do a job well, to make the money that they want, like all the things people want in life. And they're just like up all of that comes Christmas thinking as well, like time is running out and I really need to prove myself those things. And then I will feel okay. So be really on alert for all those perceived urgencies that are not. And then I'm going to recommend you make a list. So after listening to this podcast, take an A4 sheet of paper and list everything currently that is on your plate or that needs doing, right? In the next couple of months, like everything that you are carrying in your mental load. So anyway, on paper will mean that your brain will be grateful to empty itself. So put it all on paper. And then I want you to take 3 different highlighters, 3 different colors, and I want you to go through each line and make a decision. So I want you to classify into what absolutely has to happen before the end of this year, before the end of the calendar year. Right? And these are things that are really important and they are getting urgent. Like this is something anyone in your household or your friends would agree has to happen. So things that have a specific deadline with a consequence, like, an urgent thing, your car's broken down. Like, okay, so those are must happen this year. Second color, what would be nice? What are the things you kind of feel should happen this year? You would really like them to, but maybe they won't. Like you can't say that they're an absolute must. So different color, nice to have. And third color, what can actually really wait? And what can be really deprioritized and push it into next year. So do that work for what is already on your list, and then anything new gets triaged that way. Same 3 lenses, and just decide, and therefore start a 2024 to-do list, like the things that you will look at next year. And little tip, because I do this every year, I do it all. I consolidate in December what I'm going to kind of carry over. I think, when you accrue it into the next year. And when I look at the list towards mid to late January, I'm like, this doesn't really matter anymore. This isn't that relevant. This, I don't actually feel like that. So I really want you to try this exercise this year. And you can come back and tell me early next year if you've experienced the same. So really want you to go through this exercise so that you manage this arbitrary end of year and you realize what you're really deciding to take on this side of the calendar year. Number 3, and I'm going to carry on the roll that I was on by saying you need to unsubscribe from urgency culture and manage your time. All right, so I'm adding one more layer to that, but it makes complete sense with what I've just said. So what do I mean by that? You have time to answer text messages, emails, and to return phone calls. I think that is valid for any time of the year, but I really need to repeat that right now and lay some emphasis on it because you are going to get more calls, more texts, all of that because of what I've just said before. So choose what is the rule of thumb for you, what sits well with you. For me, it's at least 48 hours. I give myself 48 hours because that's how I would like to be treated. So answer it that way. Like, what is the acceptable amount of time for you when you send something to someone and they don't get back to you without you being upset or worried or disappointed, right? So for me, if I don't hear from someone for about 2 days, no worries. If it starts being 4 or 5 days or a week, then that's when I feel like, okay, I'm not really hearing back. So just decide what it is for you and stick by that. And we need to stop feeling like every time something is incoming, we need to respond. And second point is don't drop everything when something like that comes up. Especially if you're in the middle of doing something, in the middle of doing work, like you are more tired, your brain is more tired. So multitasking, aka micro switching, is even harder at this time of the year. So make it easy for yourself and don't allow those interruptions. Like these days, I'm letting my phone just beep, beep, and beep for like 2-3 hours because otherwise I'm just so scattered doing that. And in particular, if you're someone that has all kind of notifications on your phone or on your computer, this is a really timely opportunity to turn all those notifications off. Like, you have to do that. That is within your control, because those things will come at you and beep at you, and your brain will want to treat everything as a red flag, need to attend to. So you got to manage it by actually cutting off the feed of all those interruptions. When it comes to your schedule or calendar, a couple of easy rules here. Book one thing per day on days off. Just one on the weekend. Leave some time uncommitted. So look right now, where's the free time? If there is no free time between now and Christmas, you've got a bit of a problem, my friend. But that's okay. You can change it. So start uncommitting. You got to remove some of that, because you need to have some buffers, because more things will come up. And also you'll be so tired that you'll be glad you have a buffer in between. And I don't need to tell you that. I'm sure you've learned that in the past. So do it this year. Keep some buffers, or if already the time is quite committed, start removing it. And tell people, well, maybe can we move that into next year? Or instead of 4 hours, I can only do 2 hours. Instead of 2, I can do 1 hour. Like, partially, at least they commit from those things. And every time there is something new coming your way, once you've attended to the text or the email or whatever, ask yourself, do I have the capacity to take it on? Or a question which I covered in the last episode on 15 Life Truth, what would be easier on my nervous system? And answer that question for yourself. And finally, under the managing your time and scribing from urgency culture, you need to ground yourself, because that will counter all that go, 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 frantic, busy, back to back, as I'm just saying that, I'm feeling the adrenaline pumping through my body and my breath getting shallower, right? So how to counter that? My best tip is to either go in nature, just be out in the park, because nature doesn't have that, and it's very balancing. Just looking at the trees and the birds and the sky is very good for your nervous system to rebalance. Or just go and play with your kids, because kids don't have that sense of rush. I'm sure you've noticed when you're trying to get them to rush out the door. They're just cruisy. They're doing whatever they want to do. So you can immerse yourself into that, and it will help rebalance your nervous system. For my point number 4, I want to focus specifically about work. It needs its own section here. So I've got a couple of tips for you. The first one, as I said before, watch out for requests for projects to be turned around before Christmas. Like, just scan for those magical words in every conversation or emails you're going to get from your bosses or different stakeholders, and ask yourself, is it fake urgency? And ask questions. I'm not saying say no, just ask questions and try to really ascertain whether it is actually required, and then check resources and say no if it's not possible, or do it, but put very realistic timelines that you communicate so that it's manageable for you. Don't feel like because it's asked of you, you can't do any of those things and you should just shut up and do it. It's not true. So especially at that time of the year, you need to take extra care managing your workload. And hopefully your manager will be supportive. It's not a good time of the year to push your staff further. Not good, because come January, they're going to come with a resignation letter in hand because they won't be bothered coming back. So if you're a line manager too, this can be a really good time to actually be really supportive of your staff as opposed to push them further. Other tips is to keep Fridays meeting free. If you're not already doing that, really good idea this time of the year. And also have a very firm time to unplug. So watch that tendency to just stay on, stay connected, check more emails, do more. Like, you have to be onto yourself and have a clear boundary with yourself that you are logging off at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Because once you've logged off, it's way easier to manage your mind. As long as you're logged in, you just keep thinking that there is more that you need to do, and it makes it much harder for yourself. Okay, another tip, as I said before, push as much as you can into next year. Obviously, what is possible? Anything usually that would be really Christmas related, okay, you can't. But everything else is pretty much 95% of it falls into the fake urgency bucket. These are just people who, as I said, have insecurities or not that organized. They just need to know that it's going to be done so they can take a break. Guess what? It's on to them to deal with whatever is the state of things when their leave comes around. So don't let other people palm off the pressure to you. Be really discerning. And you know what? Again, like all the things that people say is important now, if you push it to the other side, my experience has been that quite often when you come back to work, or everyone comes back to work if you haven't had much of a break, a lot of things would have changed. It's like in a lot of workplaces, like things in December are not in the same place as in January. Like the world moves so fast. So a lot of the things anyway that could be done this side of the year might end up being changed or unused or completely abandoned comes late January, February. And that has been my own experience. So I really hold back as much as possible because things change the following year again. So I think that is a big learning from that, need everything to be done now. And then you have to redo it or you have to change it. And that is really not motivating you when you go back to work in the start of the year. So my advice is just to focus on the top most visible things. I have spoken about that in the Career Truth episode as well. And to drop the small stuff. Like you need to take some things out if you are putting more in at the top, right? There is no secret. And there's just one exception to everything I've just said right now is if you're looking for work. That is the only situation where I'll say push right ahead. Do as much as you can because those companies actually really rightly prioritizing securing staff and getting contracts signed so that they can onboard them and start them in the new year. So there is a flurry of activity there. And if you're a candidate looking for work, this isn't the time to slow down and to push things into next year. You really need to jump on that train and make the most of it. But everybody else, it's more about, okay, how can we pull back and pull the brakes very subtly, very implicitly on the current madness happening at work. Okay, my final point, number 5, is about changing attitudes. So this is also what Stephen Covey calls as sharpening the saw. So you've been through this quite a lot of years in a row if you're listening to this podcast, right? So what have you learned and what can you do differently this year? I'm talking, you're going to be taking more of an observer role. You're going to be stepping more into your higher self and making some calls that come from wisdom, that come from maturity and past experience. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions for you to reflect that will help you decide and identify what needs to change. First question, what will you drop or alter this year? Again, based on what happened before. And it could also be based on what is different this year in your circumstances, because I know a lot of us have gone through changes. You may be in a situation, for instance, financially that is not the same as where you were last year. So what will you drop? What will you alter? And be very honest and humble and open. And I think it takes a bit of courage as well because of the world that we live in. But I think the world needs that this year. So I've heard friends saying, well, we're not going to do presents this year. And I think it's great. It's just whatever we need to do and we manage it because no one needs more pressure or more pretending. So what are the things that you're not going to do? Are there some people you're not going to buy presents for instance? Or another question I have for you is, what has costed you in the past that you are no longer willing to put up with this year? So that could be events, activities, like certain functions of things you've done, offer to help, or baking or volunteering or hosting, like all those things you did out of your good heart, but you don't have in you this year, or things have changed for you. Or what other people maybe, that have costed you in the past that you're not prepared to let all your energy just leak out into those vacuums, because you're going to regret it. It's also a really good thing to do, to remember what made you resentful last year. And that means what will you do differently this year? And finally, what's one habit you will change? So habits are great at Christmas as in traditions. That's not what I'm saying. But we tend to just always do things we've always done, and that is for life in general. So we need to trigger our brain into changing something, because it will never suggest that to us. So what's one new thing you can do? Kind of think of it like a new tradition, something quite different from what you would do, a different kind of food you might eat, or a different kind of afternoon you will do with the kids, where you just take the whole family to go and see a movie, for instance, and you make that a new tradition. Or you take everyone to see the Christmas carols. Or, you just take a whole day where no one cooks and you just order takeaway for everyone. Like, whatever it is, but something that has never happened in your household that will give you that breath of fresh air. And it will just help shaking up that old model of, those old patterns and habits that just turn into obligations for yourself. So it's really time to reassess what stays and what goes this year. And you can do it, and you have the power, and I give it to you if you feel like you need permission, but really stuff it, I want to say, like you decide. And who else is going to stop you? I think only yourself. So take the reins and just decide what you're going to be doing and not doing this year, because frankly, we need to make it easier on ourselves. We need to shed the extra weight, because we are frankly overburdened at the moment. So what would simple look like? How can you pare it back? How can you make it easier on yourself? All right, my friend, that is all I had for you today. So just recapping what I've said, remember, first things first is you. Get really clear about what it is that you need to function. Number 2 is reverse the myth of the end of the year, and following that, unsubscribe from urgency culture and really manage your time. Then at work, be on high alert and manage as well. And then finally, just decide what stays and what goes. So I hope you find this useful. Please let me know, share a review on the podcast, send me a DM, let me know. And I really hope this has been useful. And actually, it's put me into the festive spirit, like more than I was before, because I feel like, yes, if we can all kind of set up that way, then we look forward to it a lot more, isn't it? So I'm going to wish you a great month of November. If you're listening to this at the time I'm releasing it, I still have some coaching spots for November and until about mid-December. So if you are thinking about it, even if it's just the first discovery call that you can get onto with myself, you can book it half an hour in my calendar, and we can talk about your situation and if coaching is the answer for you and what and how, right? So there is time for that. I'm obviously managing also my calendar. I live by what I preach. So if that's something that you need right now, then I highly recommend you go on my website at careercatchup.com. You browse the options, and then you can just send me an email if you need to get in touch at info@careercatchup.com. All right, my beautiful people, take care of yourself. Don't get into the silly season, get into the happy season, and really have a great time ahead. I wish you all the best, and I'll speak with you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to find out more information, you can visit my website at careercatchup.com. There you will find blog articles, free resources, a self-study course for your career direction, and ways to work with me. It's at careercatchup.com. I hope to continue to connect with you and support you. Talk to you soon.